welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 160, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
Joe Fox, who has tore himself away from life on the road as a rock star.
I've returned after licking my wounds from losing the Christmas quiz again.
I'm never coming on that podcast again.
That's it. But here we are. I'm back.
I didn't think you'd been at an after party for like 2 months.
Something like that, maybe.
Because Joe's in a metal band, aren't you?
I am in a metal band.
You've been in the studio today?
I have been in the studio today recording, so I'm a bit hoarse, actually, today. Been a busy one, but yeah, I'm back. You had to tore me away for the night.
Well, actually, last week on the show, we were talking about this guy who's just released an album on a Sega Mega Drive.
Right.
Which is pretty cool. Today, Ravi's going to tell us about this guy who's made an album using motherboard sounds in just a bit.
Motherboard debugging sounds, so this is even more geekier.
Could there be space in the band for that, do you think, Joe?
I think there could. Could be an interlude at a gig.
And also this week, we're going to be talking about a classic game as well that is back for the 21st century, ToeJam and Earl. Woo!
Yeah, so we saw a few trailers recently, didn't we? And they had how ToeJam and Earl were kind of coming into the modern age. And having to deal with modern technology and their approach to it, these 90s characters.
Been a lot of that around recently, because I think, Bubsy, there's like a new Bubsy game coming out, isn't there?
Coming out, yeah. Well, there already was a new Bubsy. This is a sequel to the new Bubsy. So it's the new Bubsy.
Spyro as well. We
had
Crash
like a couple of years ago. So yeah, no, it's good. So with the new ToeJam and Earl, maybe we should save this for the interview, but maybe with the new ToeJam and Earl, so it's not a reboot, it's an actual... It's a sequel.
The fourth game, yeah.
It's the fourth game.
in the series.
There was a third?
Yeah, there was. Number 3 came out in 2002. We need to ask Greg about that.
Okay.
This week, we're going to be talking to Greg Johnson, who is one of the co-creators of ToeJam and Earl. I mean, this guy's been in the video games industry since about 1982.
Wow.
So he's worked on a load of stuff. And ToeJam and Earl's kind of his baby. But he is bringing it back, though. There's been like a Kickstarter that's been running. Game's finally coming out on the 1st of March. So today we're going to get the story about ToeJam and Earl, where the ideas came from, those classic Mega Drive games back in the day, and find out a bit about the new version for 2019 as well. More on that coming up on the Retro Hour podcast in around 15 minutes from now. And also we've got some news about a handheld Mega Drive as well that Joe's already been eyeing up the prices on that.
Yeah, I was looking at the article. Dan always sends me the articles before, just so, so I know what we're talking about. And yeah. Pretend I know what I'm talking about. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I swear this is just the one that the retail store released 10 years ago with the red shell. And I'm like, how many times are we going to see this? But interestingly, it's not. It's a Japanese one made by, I forget the name of the company. It's Columbia something. Let me have a look.
Well, we'll get more into that in a minute.
We'll get
the full story off Ravi. But before we do it, let's give a big shout to our donators before we get into this week's podcast now. The reason we accept donations on the website is to go into the running of this show.
Yeah, and also the running of the website, the kind of us going to events as well, because we're going to be coming to Play Expo as well. We're going to do Manchester this year, London as well. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, we've actually got a phone call when we finish today about a planning meeting for Play Expo in Manchester. It's coming together, and this is going to be. And I know we say it about pretty much all the Play Expos, but they keep getting bigger and bigger, don't they?
Well, who have we already got there? We've got Matthew Smith coming, the legend from Jet Set Willy.
Yep.
We've got the Nightmare crew coming there to perform Nightmare live on stage. David Rose, some of the original artists of Nightmare, and a lot more surprises coming up as well.
Yeah, so we'll keep you up to date on those over the next few weeks as we announce more names, and I'm sure we'll have a little giveaway for some tickets as well. But obviously the reason we accept donations on our website is to allow us to do these big events and keep this podcast going week in, week out. And anything we get, 100% goes back into the running of the show. So we appreciate every penny, every cent, every dollar, every pound, every euro. And for making a donation of any amount, you will find your place in the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. Like this week, Dennis Beverloo,
Ryan Schuler,
Stephen Quinn,
and Cameron Armstrong, who all made donations. And you can do the same. We've got a little PayPal link in our supporters section on our website at theretrohour.com. Now, before we get into that handheld Mega Drive story that we need to talk about, we've got some cool little magazines in front of us here, haven't we?
Yeah.
Actually, very big magazines. These are quite weighty.
Yeah, so this is called Commodore and Amiga Plus, and this is a Commodore computer users magazine. Now, I was a subscriber to Amiga Future and stuff, and I like Amiga Future, but I was reading a lot of stuff online.
Yeah.
We were handed this magazine in Amiga Island, yeah, and this is basically all handwritten articles, beautiful artwork on there, and they're fully going in depth about the community. You know, there's stuff that's available in this magazine that's not online, and they're doing a Polish version of it and a English translated version. And this is a beautiful magazine. You know, you can get it in print.
Yeah, well, it's 81 pages, this issue I've got here. So that's the thing normally about, like, modern retro magazines, apart from Retro Gamer, obviously, but kind of the smaller ones are generally quite thin and stapled.
Yeah.
This is bound. It's got a glossy cover, full colour, 81 pages.
I'm holding it in my hands and I'm looking at the quality of it. And I'm like, this is really nice.
Yeah.
Like, really good.
I'm going to do the proper test that you have to do. Hang on, let me just peel back the front cover.
You got to sniff it.
Yeah, you got to smell it.
I was literally thinking to myself then, is he going to sniff it?
That's a test of a quality mag.
Yeah, that's a good sniff.
So how often does this come out then?
This kind of comes out so that's the summer-autumn issue
Right.
that you've got at the moment. So I guess it's seasonal at the moment. And they're a small group, and their website's kaplus.pl. So it's a Polish website, but this is Polish and English, and it's pretty awesome.
I've got issue number 9 here.
Yeah.
We've got the Memories of LucasArts. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Their background.
We've done a couple of shows on them before, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's great. I mean, I do love a magazine, and we've talked about that on the show before. I mean, yeah, okay, you can get news and you can get articles on the web, and you can sit on the toilet with an iPad, I guess. But...
I was about to say, for me, whenever I go on holiday, I always like to go into the WH Smith's in the airport, and I always like to find myself a retro game magazine. I can always find one, and they've always got this good quality, glossy pages, and it just keeps me entertained on the flight, end up reading on the beach and stuff like that. So I could see 100% this is one I'd probably pick up for that kind of instance. So it's really nice, really nice artwork, like hand-drawn artwork on the front as well. So
what I love about mags as well is kind of a bit of escapism. If you're reading something on the web, you've got like your Facebook Messenger popping up and Twitter, and just check that email out. Your attention span is so short on a website. But if you've got a magazine, you're on a train, I'll read it cover to cover. If I've got like a mag.
100%.
So great work, guys. Keep up the good work on the mag. And if you want to get hold of your copy of it, we'll put a link in our show notes this week at theretrohour.com. So let's talk about the 16-bit Pocket Mega Drive.
Well, I think Pocket MD, I don't know if you can call it Pocket Mega Drive.
Trademark.
Trademark. But this is really good because they're actually saying in the article here on Nintendo Life, amazingly, they're talking about Mega Drive. Yeah, they're saying that, a lot of these Mega Drive consoles came out and they weren't that high quality. But this one's surprising. It's actually got quite a nice screen. And the D-pad's supposed to be really nice, and it's got 6-button support. They're saying there's still a few problems, though, with the sound emulation, which always seems to be the one.
That was the thing I was about to mention, is the sound emulation. It says in the article it's better than some of the clone consoles we've had recently, but it's still not quite what we're after.
Yeah, they're saying
really.
It's the bass. You can never get the bass right on Mega Drive emulation.
It's weird, though. You'd think like that chip, the Yamaha chip in there, it's like... 1988? That was designed?
Yeah.
Why is it still so hard to emulate it
God
31
knows.
years later?
God knows.
It all seems to be the sticking point, isn't it, the audio?
Yeah. I think what's good to point out as well, though, is it's actually got its own cartridge slot for a handheld. That's what I was getting to earlier on when I was rambling, was it looks like one of these old knockoff ones from Game. However, they never had the cartridge ports on the back, whereas this has got one, which is also, well, obviously it works on Japanese games because it's a Japanese company. And then
they've said, actually, it doesn't work on Japanese games. It's not region free, but it supports the EverDrive, which is the one that you can put the SD card in.
I'm looking at these pictures, Ravi, and they're Japanese cartridges, so I'm just saying.
No, PAL and North American games with Regent lots refuse to work.
Yeah, just put the ones I can find next to the picture of it, didn't they? I'm looking at it, and yeah, all right. Having Mega Drive games on, the screen looks pretty nice in it from what I've seen. The button layout looks a bit weird, though. Because I know they did have the, the more advanced controllers, the 6-button ones, didn't they? I guess it's going to go for that approach.
It's similar to that, but it's more of an angle.
Yeah.
I don't remember it being that much of an angle on the original 6-button.
Now, these slope, like, completely diagonally, don't
they?
Yeah,
completely. I think that's just to fit it onto the handheld device, though.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know the Nomad was, like, the one that everyone wanted back in the day.
Yeah, this is probably, with the cartridges in the top, it's only probably, half an inch wider than the cartridges on each side, and the Nomad was quite bulky, wasn't it? So this does look about the same, a little bit bigger maybe than an iPhone. So.
Yeah. And there is something cool about putting cartridges in it and playing like the actual game rather than having
something very nostalgic about that, especially the noise of it all as well.
Then
it's
not working.
It's probably a lot cheaper than a Nomad as well.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I'd almost certainly say it is. I mean, I think any project like this, it's attempting to kind of do something a little bit different with retro games and, giving you a way to play them on the move is always cool as well. 'Cause, I mean, my Switch is like probably my most played console, just because you can pick it up and while you're watching telly, you can play it, which is pretty cool.
Can you imagine taking this on a plane or on a train with you, and you've got all your cartridges in your bag?
I find having the Switch with me, like, and a few cartridges, what a pain to carry them around. But yeah, they're not the smallest things in the world, Mega Drive carts, are they?
No, you probably have an EverDrive though, but just it'd be funny just to have like your favourite free games in your bag.
And the price of this, I mean, I'm looking at this article here, and apparently like £43. So
it's not too bad.
That's like, that's an impulse buy, really, isn't it? I'd probably get one just for the hell of it. But yeah, I mean, I'll wait to see a few reviews, I think, of how well it runs on YouTube and stuff. Let's talk about this album then. Now, we did mention last week there was a techno DJ who'd brought out his album on a Mega Drive, which probably wouldn't play all that well on this device here, actually, thinking about it, because it needs good audio emulation. But this guy had to go one better then.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have ever built a PC.
Oh, yeah. I've got the scars on my hands to prove it.
When you have the problems with the motherboard and you're kind of trying to work out what your problems is, you can plug this tiny little speaker in and the motherboard will give beeps. So, like, 1 beep means the RAM's okay, 3 beeps, and there's a little code that basically will be telling you, and the motherboard does diagnosis this way. Now, a guy's managed to create a full album using these system beeps, and he's created it on YouTube, but he's also done it as a 42 kilobyte download, so you can run it on an MS-DOS original program, or you can run it on a DOS emulator like DOSBox, and have it playing these kind of crazy system codes.
So these from the PC speaker?
The
little
little tiny
That's
speaker.
amazing.
Shall we listen? Okay, here's a little bit of it. And it's not like... I was thinking... Oh, wow. I was thinking it'd be one song. It's not. It's like a 26-minute album.
Yeah.
Some nasty sounds in there, actually, isn't there? Quite grimy.
I keep thinking something's going to kick in, like a drum beat underneath, but...
It's awesome.
It's very Mega Man-esque.
Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that you can do that with a simple beeping speaker that must have took ages to do that.
Yeah, because you remember some of the old speaker sound effects when you play on the early DOS games. And like, I remember Stunt Car Racer when you do a jump and it would go... It was like, just a little tiny kind of noise on the chair.
It didn't even sound that good.
No.
But again, I mean, we're talking about the creativity of the retro community. The fact that some guys made, like, it's a concept album essentially.
It's a labour of love.
Yeah, do it.
It's a super geeky labour of love, that is.
I'm not sure I can listen to all 23 tracks of it, but I might have to work my way gradually through the album.
Probably on a nightclub sound system, you'd be into that.
It's not something you'd put on like while you're driving to work or something. Get myself in the mood for work.
Then again, I've had days at work that maybe I'd listen to it driving.
Unless you're testing motherboards.
Unless that is your job.
That's the thing. I wonder, like, if your motherboard did stop making those noises, you'd be like, oh, I plugged something in wrong here. But if you're doing a check the whole thing
Somebody's going to listen to that and go, oh, yeah, that means this is wrong with the motherboard.
I heard, an error 42 tone in there somewhere. So if you're doing to check the full thing out, it's all on YouTube for free. You don't have to buy it. We'll put a link in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, when you're in the high street, I mean, last week we were talking about like shops that we like going to and the experience of shopping. We mentioned stuff like you're talking about the Microsoft store that you went to.
Yeah, the Windows stores in America.
And the Apple stores, obviously, very popular places. What about a Raspberry Pi store?
Well, they've just opened one in Cambridge, which totally makes sense because that's where the whole Raspberry Pi Foundation and everything came from. And this looks pretty awesome. They've got a lot of modules for the kits and stuff. And it's just nice to see a retailer that isn't Apple or Windows, having their own store. And Raspberry Pis are great. Like, I always love the idea that these were originally put out for educational school kids. And then everybody else has taken up on them, turned them into all kinds of crazy devices, running them as emulators and stuff. I guess they were never kind of intended to be mass market, were they? They were aimed at just the school kids.
I wonder if you walked into the shop and you spoke to one of the staff members, and you're like, right, I want the new Raspberry Pi because I want to illegally emulate all these retro games. I wonder if they'd be like, oh, this one's the best for that kind of thing, or like what they'd actually. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wonder
well,
if they'd
we
actually
can't condone that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. But if you bought this one,
I mean, they generally do get behind most uses of it. I mean, running the emulators itself is not illegal, is it? In most cases.
Yeah, true.
If you've got the ROMs and all that yourself.
Yeah.
I guess that's the way.
I ripped them directly from the cartridges myself.
Yeah. Show me a photo to prove you and all this.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something really special about a store that you can walk into and get hands-on with stuff as well. So I always found that, they bring out a new version of the Raspberry Pi. It hasn't been as bad with the recent ones, but there was always a time when if you didn't get them on day one, you'd have to wait about 3 months sometimes.
Yeah, and all it would be the bare board.
Yeah.
Like, they wouldn't sell battery packs. I remember getting loads of power chargers for phones, trying to use them, getting the power display thing until I bought the official Raspberry Pi power supply, 2.1 amp or whatever, and that basically kept it stable. So having all these extra things are really awesome. You might have like an official case, and they might have battery packs as well, but it will all be the correct kind of voltage and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of eBay stores that sell all these Raspberry Pi accessories, and some of them are bad and some are good. So
you never know what you're getting off eBay, though.
I remember a few years ago, you, Dan, telling me about the Raspberry Pi and stuff and how you were struggling so much to get a hold of the particular one you wanted.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking to myself, why would just order it? Do you know what I mean? But it was clearly a huge demand for it. So.
Well, no, the last one they brought out, they did actually make a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think they underestimated I think it was the version 3, I think it was. The one that I struggled to get hold of straight away because it did sell out really quickly. But then when they brought the next one out, the mini one, so they gave it away in a magazine as well, didn't they? That Magpie
Raspberry
magazine.
Pi Zero, that was the really
I remember
tiny
you
one.
looking for the magazine. I remember we were in Manchester or Blackpool, and you were like every newsagent. So I'm just going to pop in here.
See, the thing was, the mag was like a £5. I already had a better Raspberry Pi anyway. The fact that it was free, I probably spent about 20 quid on petrol driving around on a Saturday night to try and get that from newsagents. But you remember there'd be all these guys that would like go into WH Smith. I remember my local Asda I went into, and I asked a guy there, I was like, have you got a copy of this month's Magpie? Because weirdly enough, you're about the 8th person to ask me that tonight. A guy came in today and he bought like all 20 copies of them. Put them on eBay,
Yeah.
But I mean, I imagine the Raspberry Pi store would sell Magpie magazine.
Oh, yeah. And another thing is as well, like the modules that they have on there. When the Raspberry Pi first came out, there wasn't that many modules, like LCD screens that you can plug onto it, the Pi camera, all these like sensors and temperature stuff. But now it's been developed and there's a lot of people owning them. There's a lot more choice. So you can do tons more with your Raspberry Pi than you could before.
And I wonder, with the Raspberry Pi store, I mean, reading, there's only a short article that we've got here on boingboing.net, but I imagine, they will do stuff like the Apple Store do, I imagine, where they do little workshops and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Even watching the video, they had like coding corner.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, people could probably come in and learn. Like, I doubt they're going to make that much money off markup off selling Raspberry Pis compared to iPad Pros. It's like...
Yeah, I think you probably buy about like 50 Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, I think it is more for the community and more to have a shop front for it in Cambridge.
Yeah. Well, it essentially becomes a bit of like a user group, I guess, if people are going there and they're learning programming and, what to do with a Raspberry Pi. That's the one thing you always find, and, we've talked about it before, that everyone buys Raspberry Pis, and I've got about 4 or 5 of them, and... Most of them are like, I'll do something with them, then they're sitting in a drawer doing nothing. I always see threads on forums as well. So to support this Raspberry Pi, what can I do with it? And then there's threads and threads. It's always interesting to find out what people are doing. Weather stations, generally, that seems to be the main thing.
Yeah, mine's been a cloud server, a streaming little box, an MP3 player.
Only thing I've ever used one for is retro games.
Yeah. It's good for that as well.
It is good, though.
So I got one of the, it's Monster Joystick, isn't it?
Yeah.
They do this really cool little kit where, Ravi's got one at the moment where you've got a joystick, haven't you, for
Yeah, so I've got
computers.
a joystick that can remap the fire buttons for old consoles where the fire button's up, which is awesome. You just do a switch at the back and it assigns it to another button.
Okay.
Dan's got one where it's got a Raspberry Pi built in.
Yeah, so it's arcade joystick parts.
Yeah, Samoa.
6 buttons, clicky joystick like you had in the
Wow.
arcade.
But that's the Raspberry Pi.
Raspberry Pi goes underneath it,
Yeah.
connects into the GPIO ports on top. output your HDMI and you can get MAME on there, and it's a great little all-in-one. You'll have to have a go when you come
Wow.
over next. It's
Yeah,
really
where did you
cool.
get that from?
Yeah, well, they sent it to me very nicely.
Joysticks.com. Where did you get that from? Well.
Not in return for a shout-out, but they were very kind enough to send me one. But yeah, if you do want to get hold of one of those, actually, they're really good. I'll stick a link in this week's show notes. Now, before we get into our interview this week talking about ToeJam and Earl, what you can do with the Doom engine never ceases to amaze me. How many things have we seen running on the Doom engine?
What was the last one? Doom Golf.
Yeah, Doom Golf we're talking about the
Doom
other week.
Paintball. Chocolate Doom, I remember that. Simpsons Doom back in the days.
Chocolate.
What about Legend of Zelda running on the Doom engine?
I need to see this.
This guy's done it. It looks really cool. Actually, graphically, it reminds me a little bit of like Minecraft. It's a bit like...
Yeah, it's kind of got the blocky vibe, hasn't it?
Yeah, and you walk around as Link with your sword. And what's really cool is you go around some areas of the game and there are like characters from different games, including the original Doom characters are in there too. So if you want to kill one of them with like the Link sword, you can.
But if you notice on the bottom screenshot, it's still got the Doom medical pack as the kind of
I've just noticed that. That's amazing.
So looking at it, I mean, I think graphically, like I said, Minecraft's what it makes me think of first of all. I look at it and I think, yeah, that kind of very blocky kind of Lego brick style graphics. But at the moment, they've kind of started this, but they haven't got the resources to finish it on their own. It's a crew called Exodus on ModDB, which I imagine is like the big, Doom modding site that you.
It's like a general database. So they have like old games, but also modern ones. So they'll have like GTA and GTA Vice City, do the full range.
And mods and stuff for it. Okay, got you. Well, at the moment they're saying, they've opened this to anyone that wants to finish it off or improve upon it. So there is a little video running on YouTube as well that kind of shows you around it, and like you can see it running. It does look really good, actually.
Well, I'd like the kind of Doom mode in there. So if you could be Link and just get a shotgun.
Yeah,
just go around.
That would actually be brilliant.
When I was looking at this, first thing that came to my mind is Ravi would love to play this in like virtual reality.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That would be good. I don't know if it
that
made
is
me
right
sick.
up Ravi's street.
The Doom engine in VR, it makes me sick anyway. Doom, like the frame rate.
Yeah, even playing it on like a CRT and stuff these days, sometimes I'm a bit like, oh, kind of feel a bit queasy.
Yeah.
But, I just think it's amazing the things people are still doing with the Doom engine like 25 years after it came out. It's just nuts, and I'm sure we'll be seeing lots more over the...
I was going to say, I'm sure this isn't the end of it.
Lots of people have been turning stuff into first-person shooters. Chaos Engine.
Yeah,
One that was done recently on the Unreal Engine as well. So.
Yeah. The FPS is definitely one genre that's like, stood the test of time.
Resident Evil 2 remake, somebody's already made that first-person shooter.
Oh, really?
Modded it already.
That's only been out like, 2 weeks?
About 2 weeks, yeah. And that's all about 5 days ago.
I'm sure we'll be looking at that in depth in the future, Ed.
Anna showed me that, and I was like, no, it's too smooth. I want the screens and the doors back.
That frame rate looks far too good.
Weird angles.
If I haven't had a seizure or vomited within 5 minutes, it's not for me. Right then, well, that's all the news we've got for this week. If you want to check out any of those stories, of course, we save you the trouble of Googling them. We put them all in our show notes at theretrohour.com. And now let's talk about the legendary ToeJam and Earl series and about the new game that's coming out very soon as well with this week's guest, Greg Johnson. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time to welcome on this week's very special guest. Welcome to the show, Greg Johnson.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, Greg. Now, we've timed this very well, I think, actually, because Ravi and I are really excited about the return of ToeJam and Earl in a brand new game for 2019 that we will, of course, talk about in just a bit. Before we get into that, though, I mean, it would be quite cool to find out a bit of history about, obviously, ToeJam and Earl and you as well. I mean, what originally got you into video games?
Well, when I started, I hate to say this, but kind of old. I started back in 1982. So when I started, video games didn't really exist yet. There were arcade games back then. You would go to the to the bowling alley and play arcades, or we had, Space Invaders, tabletop games and that sort of thing. And then they were just coming out. There was the Atari 800. It was even before the Commodore 64 came out. And so I remember seeing my first video game when I was in college and being kind of blown away by it. And it sort of changed the direction of my life, actually. I had been, I was in college studying, biolinguistics. It was a major I had made up because my plan was to talk to the dolphins and whales, figure out what their secret language was, and then be in the position to be the guy that got called in when the aliens landed. So I'd be talking to them, and that's what I was studying. And then my roommate brought home an Atari 800, and I stood behind him, watched him playing these games, and was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun and so cool. And he got involved with a video game, a very early video game with EA, Electronic Arts, that was just getting off the ground. They were like 20 people. And I said, oh, can I do that? Like for the summer, I thought it would be really fun. And so I got involved with my very first game, which was Starflight, one of EA's early games. And then I just kept doing it. Every year I would think, oh, I'll just do this for another year and I'll go back to grad school next year. And then I looked up and it was like 35 years later. So that's what happened.
How did you kind of transfer from, marine stuff to programming, and what language did you start on?
Well, let's see. I worked at Scripps Institute, which is, you may know, is an oceanographic institute in San Diego when I was in college, and that was in preparation for my the career I thought I was going to have. And I was actually coding there in BASIC, which is it's so funny to think about that now. It's so old. But I had done a bunch of coding in school, but this was like a self-designed major. I was really interested in language and thinking and what happens in the brain and how we perceive. And I still am fascinated by that stuff. So I ended up, oddly enough, kind of using that stuff in my gaming career, creating aliens to talk to and figuring out systems for how they would speak, and language and personality simulation and all of that kind of stuff. All of the things I had been kind of preparing for in school to do research on, I ended up kind of building in a more playful way. And you'll notice a theme in a lot of my games. There's aliens. If you look at the things I've built and worked on over the years, that keeps popping up again and again. So I guess I've got a bit of an obsession with that.
One of the early games around that time, I mean, I did read that you were into Rogue as well, the dungeon crawler game.
Yeah, that's right. When I was, my last couple of years of school were at UC San Diego, and I spent many, many nights, late nights up till 3 or 4 in the morning playing Rogue. And that was in the days, when you would play on a mainframe computer and they had all these little rooms you would go into where there was a little, a little desk with a black and white CRT monitor. And I would sit there playing with, in ASCII characters, the little characters. And the whole game, happens in your head, in your imagination, and you're being chased by vampires and zombies and collecting scrolls and potions and all that kind of stuff. But it was all just letters on the screen. But I was completely taken with Rogue. And so no coincidence that ToeJam and Earl is essentially Rogue under the hood. And of course, that was in the days when it was Rogue. There were no roguelikes. You just played Rogue. And so ToeJam and Earl, I guess, I'm trying to think if there were any other Rogue based games prior to TJ&E. I think we were really one of the first. We came out before Diablo did. Diablo was probably the biggest main other game that started the roguelike genre, but we came out a few years before that. I think, I think Gauntlet preceded us, but I don't know if that was an arcade game back then. It wasn't like a console game, and so they may lay claim to the first roguelike.
Well, talking about your early games, I mean, Starflight, that was the first game that you did. I mean, what was the story behind Starflight then? How did that game get started, and what did you want to achieve on that?
So none of us knew how to make a game in those days. Nobody really did. We were all sort of making it up as we went along. None of us had ever built a game before, and even EA, they had done a few games preceding us. For example, one of the games that came before us was Archon, done by a really good friend of mine, Paul Ritchie. So Paul was at EA before me, and he was kind of like my mentor. I didn't know what I was doing, and I remember he said to me one day, okay, we'll get a big piece of paper, and I want you to write down everything that happens in the game all over the floor on this big piece of paper and connect it with lines and create kind of a network of, if you do this, then that happens. If you do this, then that happens. And he said, and work backwards. Start at the end and then work backwards. So that was my assignment from Paul, and he was kind of like my Yoda. I would go running to Paul every time. I was like, okay, Paul, now I'm confused. What should I do? And I did that. I made a huge sheet of paper for Starflight, and that mapped out all of the causality of the game. And and we just we kind of made it up as we went along. The game was almost canceled at least 4 or 5 times. We were always right on the edge. It took us 3.5 years, I think, to make that game. But we had very high ideals. It was based very much on my obsession with Star Trek, and I was also in those days big into Jack Vance. I don't know if you've read any Jack Vance, but he's very erudite and very funny, and he does all of this crazy cultural personality stuff. And so I was really into that, and so all the alien races had all of these weird personalities, and every one of them was kind of a satire on a persona of a character. So I had a lot of fun creating a universe of just weird caricatures of people in the form of all these different alien races. I could ramble on a lot about it. I'm not sure what you want me to say about it, but it was a very pivotal experience for me in my life as my first major game, and there was a lot of interesting characters on the team too, very unusual people who I'm still in contact with, the whole team today.
Well, you mentioned there that EA was really small at the time. What was it kind of like during those early days?
Oh, yeah. Well, there was, Trip Hawkins and Bing Gordon and Stuart Bond. Those were the guys running EA. They were young and idealistic. They had this idea that they wanted to promote the artists over the games, and they had this kind of like the entertainment, the music industry. They wanted to make sort of rock stars out of the artists, and you might have you seen any of those old photos with EA artists like in the black turtleneck shirts, and they're kind of so funny and so dated looking at that stuff now. But that was their concept, and the artists, of course, all the developers were very into that idea, and it was a very tight-knit community too. I don't know if you know this, but the Game Developers Conference actually started with the EA conference that we had every year, once a year, and we'd get together with, I don't know how many it was, maybe it started about 15 or 20 developers, and it grew very slowly to 30 or 40 developers, and we would get together and just talk about the games we were doing. And I remember just being young and so excited about the day I would get to stand up there and have a finished game and talk to those developers about what I was doing. And Bill Budge and Danny Bunton and John Freeman and Ray Toby, all these developers from those days who I just had so much respect for. And, everybody was experimenting. We were all just sharing kind of what our discoveries were, and is so different than going to GDC these days, which is like going to E3, You're lucky if you see anybody you know.
I think you made an interesting point there as well, because I think maybe EA don't quite get the credit they deserve for how far they kind of pushed graphics forward back in the 80s. I know their big product was Deluxe Paint, wasn't it? And that was kind of like industry standard in games for many years, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you were mentioning that just coincidentally or not, but yeah, I was, I worked on Deluxe Paint in those early days, and it was a blast. Yeah, I was one of the artists that sat in the back room at EA. And it was so funny because in those days, that was before anybody realized that you can have actual real artists doing art. It was all just pixel pushing. And they were like, hey, can you draw? And I was like, maybe, kind of. And they said, okay, we need some art for Deluxe Paint. Sit down here and give us some artwork. And so me and my wife at that time were the two primary artists for that program, and Yeah, that was actually prior even to me, doing a lot of development. I guess I had done Starflight before that, but it was some good memories. It was an exciting time, actually. I feel old saying this kind of thing. It's like talking about when you saw your first automobile or something. But I do remember, we were working with like 16 color fixed palettes, and then all of a sudden, like when D-Paint came along, we could use like 32 colors and choose whatever colors we wanted. It was like mind-blowing at the time. Even today, though, that program still, I still wish I had it sometimes when I'm like working in Photoshop and stuff. It was so graceful and easy to use.
Well, another project you were working on were the Caveman Olympics. What were your role in that?
Oh, wow, you did your homework. That's that's good. Yeah, I was the designer on that one, and I worked with kind of remotely with a group in Eugene, Oregon called Dynamics. Yeah, I think it was Bing Gordon that came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to do another game. What would you think about like a Caveman Olympics game?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun." And it was a crazy game. It was a multiplayer game that came out on the Commodore 64, and you would compete trying to make a fire and bash each other on the head with your sticks as you were making your fire. Or, there was the clubbing event where you tried to club each other over the head. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. Or the pole vault over a dinosaur.
My friend Sean had that. We used to play it when we were kids. He had it in his Commodore 64. I think we
No kidding.
We destroyed about 6 joysticks playing that game, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, the event where you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and you had to rock your joystick back and forth as fast as you could. I think that broke a lot of joysticks. It's pretty funny. But that was a lot of fun. I got to fly back and forth to Eugene and work with the folks up there. They were a super great group. And what? One thing though that's kind of funny, they did. If you look at the box of Caveman Olympics and you see the photos of the developers, since they were all in Eugene and I was down in the Bay Area, they said to me, "Okay, we're going to do photos for the box, and we're all going to look like caveman. So take a picture like that of yourself and send it to us." So, of course, I just did, and I looked like a caveman. And then when the box came out, I looked at it, and nobody else had done it. They were all just sitting there smiling. I was the only one looking like a caveman. I was like, "Oh, thanks, guys."
Well, another game you worked on that was, the complete opposite of Caveman Olympics was FA-18 Interceptor.
Yeah. I didn't do a whole lot on that, actually. That was when I was still pretending to be an artist, and I just did the cockpit art for that and some other bits and pieces for that. But it was fun. I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, just very nostalgic those days, sitting in a room playing music and doing art. I couldn't imagine getting away with that. Now there's so many really, really good artists in the industry, like real actual artists.
Well, let's get on to your most famous characters. How did you come up with the characters of ToeJam and Earl?
I don't know. Is the honest to gosh answer to that. They just sort of popped into my head one day. I had been undergoing a lot of stress, not all bad stress, but making Starflight 1 and 2, they were kind of exhausting games, sort of big, epic role-playing adventure games. And ToeJam and Earl came kind of after that. And so I guess it wasn't too surprised that I still had aliens in my subconscious. And I've told this story a few times, but it's because it's the truth. I woke up one night, right in the middle of the night, and I was having a dream, and I had this conversation with these two funky aliens from the hood talking in my head, and I scribbled it down and then went back to sleep. That's sort of what they had said. And then the next day I was looking at that, and I just was doodling, and I doodled some pictures of what they would look like. And they actually ended up looking exactly like what I had drawn.
It is amazing that they literally came to you in a dream then.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had a very active subconscious, and have just like crazy wild dreams. And I don't know, why that is, but I wish I had a a way of recording all that stuff, because I'd have volumes of games, game designs and stories and stuff. But I wake up with weird bits of imagery all the time, and sometimes it makes sense, and most of the time it doesn't.
Well, were they kind of influenced by the urban culture at the time? There was a lot of hip hop coming out, and there was I remember the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and those kind of shows.
Attitude, wasn't it? Yeah.
The Tude era, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I grew up in LA, in sort of halfway between West LA and East LA, and it was very urban. And back in the 70s, when I was in high school, I had a big afro. You might have seen some pictures of me. My dad's black, my mom's white. I look white, but I guess through part of my career, exploring a little bit of who I am and my identity. My family is very mixed. So if you look at my games, you'll see ToeJam and Earl are clearly black characters. Yo, what's up? My homeboy and all that kind of thing. And Orly's Draw Story was a young black Jamaican girl. And even in Doki Doki Universe, there was a lot of cultural stuff like that. And I've always loved funk music. It's been a part of who I am, and growing up, it was kind of my genre that I always listened to. And I don't mean to ever be like a pretender. I haven't had the experience of growing up looking black and all of that. But I do, it is part of who I am, and it's real. And I think ToeJam and Earl is kind of just an expression of that, I think it just kind of came out of my mind as these characters who were part of how I think and feel, and I just kind of, there's something about that juxtaposition of these two very funky, cool homeboys, who were in this spaceship with giant speakers blasting this funk music, and then crash landing on Earth with this crazy, insane, self-involved culture of all these different Earthlings, and then not being able to figure out what they see around them and wanting to get the heck out of there. That whole idea just somehow struck a chord with me. It's all like in hindsight, sort of post analysis, because I didn't really think about why it was what it was. It just sort of struck me as funny and felt good. It's not intellectual and it's not super deep. It's kind of was more of an emotional expression. It was also a way to kind of cut loose too, after Starflight, where I was feeling kind of tired. I wanted to do a game that would just be fun and would be lighthearted, and let me crank the music in the office. And my partner who made that game with me, Mark Vorsanger, when I described the concept to him, both of the game itself and of kind of what I wanted going forward with that sort of lighter vibe, and just to have fun and to do something that was silly and that would let us laugh. And also part of that was making a game that would be cooperative, that we could enjoy making together because we could play it. And that's partly why it was going to be a random game, so that we could play it over and over again as we were building it and enjoy the process. Mark was really into all of that. He was like, this sounds like a blast. Let's do it.
Well, he did mention about the soundtrack as well, and I mean, that was awesome on the game. John Baker, I know he used a lot of influence in that game. Even stuff like, I read that he was really into Herbie Hancock at the time, and he kind of, worked that in there too.
Yeah, that's right. So John Baker and Mark Miller were the two primaries on the original soundtrack. John did most of the composition, and Mark was more the kind of technical guy, because, and he deserves a lot of credit too, because Mark really pushed the boundaries on sound quality and on getting sort of instruments that sounded real. Those were the days when everything sounded, tweaky and 8-bit and stuff, and so he made it sound like actual basses and drums and that kind of thing. But yeah, John has always been into funk, but he's also really into jazz, and so a lot of the composition actually I did as well. I would sing songs into in those days it was into a tape recorder. I would go walking on the hills and in Novato and sing into the tape recorder, and then I would bring all of these to John, and he would listen to them, and then he would sort of turn that into actual good sounding music. And then, of course, he came up with some on his own as well. So it was very collaborative and a lot of fun. And in fact, that's very much how we did the music on this new game as well, because we took about 15 of the old songs and remade them, and then came up with about 15 new songs as well. On pretty much all of those, I was the genesis, where I would sing into no longer a tape recorder, now my smartphone, and come up with the various bass lines and drum lines, and here's the chorus or whatever. And then I would grit my teeth and, with a lot of embarrassment, sit there as I played it for Burke Trishman and Cody Wright, who is our bassist and guitar player for this. And they would have to hear me singing. But yeah, like Cody is the most amazing bass player ever. He would listen to it once and he'd go, okay, yeah, I think I got it. And then he'd pick up his bass and he would just do what I just did, but make it sound a million times better. And that's how we did the music on actually all the games.
Well, one thing I also remember lots is the sound effects and kind of the slang and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of fun recording those?
I did, yeah. So as you kind of imply there, I did pretty much all the sound effects, and even sound effects you wouldn't necessarily expect to be done by voice. It was cheaper and easier. These were really the garage shop game days, and so, instead of looking for the sound of a button press or a splash of water or something, I was sitting there doing all of these whoop, boop, sounds into my microphone. And I would do all of the voices. Some of them had to be kind of loud, so I would do it late at night after everybody else had gone out of the offices, because we were in this suite of offices with all these people around us, and I couldn't do, dentist cackles and all of these other crazy loud sounds. So I did all of that mostly because it was cheap and practical. I had fun, of course, doing it, but that was really the reason. And then when we got to doing our new game, we thought we would upgrade. And very early on in the process, when fans started hearing the audio for the new game, I was surprised because we got feedback from them saying, hey, wait a second, where's all the old crazy vocal sounds that you did? And I said, well, we made these sounds new, they're better, and they're like, no, we want the old school stuff, get a microphone and just do it yourself. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, we actually downgraded the sound quality in this game because of what the fans were asking for, which is a little bizarre, but fun and understandable. I guess, people want to be taken back to where they were and their childhood memories and that kind of stuff. So, it all makes sense, I guess, once you hear that.
I remember when the game came out, some of the kids at school who had Super Nintendos were a bit jealous that they couldn't play it. How did the partnership with Sega come about then?
It was just kind of happenstance. Sega of America had just kind of gotten started. They were just opened up in the Bay Area, and once again, just like my story with EA, they were just, I don't know how many people, but maybe 15 or 20 people there. They didn't even have any on staff legal yet. They just had a couple producers, and the fellow that was the executive there, his name was Hugh Bowen. And Mark and I made an appointment with them. I can't remember who our contact was that got us in there. We went in to see Hugh and tell him about this crazy idea of these funky aliens and this satirical, weird world that had just everything thrown into it that you could imagine. And we weren't really expecting much of anything. We knew it was kind of off the wall and didn't know if they were going to like it or think we were crazy. And I sat on the floor in Hugh's office. Me and Mark sat there, and I put down all of these 3x5 cards that I had made that were sort of these faux terrain tiles to show how the terrain would work when it was placed randomly together. And we waved our arms around and regaled him with stories of hula dancers and boogeymen and crazy dentists and afterwards, and funk, of course, and fun, and Lamont and Funkatron and all that stuff. And yeah, and Hugh surprised us and said, "This is awesome. I love it." And we were like, "Really? You do?" And he's like, "Yes." So even for a while, we thought that we might be the mascot characters for Sega because Hugh loved it so much. And then he got us a producer, Scott Burfield, who also just loved the whole concept. And they were championing us being, Sega's Mario. And we thought we were going to be in that spot. And then a while later, we got word, that Sega of Japan had nixed that idea, and basically we had been ousted by this little angry blue hedgehog. And
so I remember your game came out really close to Sonic, didn't it? There's only a couple of months between ToeJam and Earl and the first Sonic game.
Yeah, I'm actually not even sure about the timing of that. It was right around the same time, and I can't remember which one hit first, so you'll know probably better than I do. But yeah, we were feeling like Sonic was our competitor, like he had bumped us out of the chair that we were all excited about being in. And I was all pissy about Sonic too until I actually played it and then realized what a fun game it was. And so then I couldn't be too angry at it anymore.
Well, one thing about kind of releasing games for consoles back then compared to nowadays, you can easily update them and you can add new content nowadays, but back then you had to have interesting things to keep people playing, and the random generation of levels seemed to be a really interesting idea. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I'd love to take full credit for that and bask in my own glory. Unfortunately, the truth is, that's just a straight ripoff of Rogue. And, I can take credit for some of the things. Instead of going down in the dungeon, I flipped it upside down so that you were going up. And that allowed us to do some fun things like having you fall off of levels. And of course, doing making it into a multiplayer game and doing the dynamic split screen and all of that was original to ToeJam and Earl. But the randomness was and still is something I love in games just in general. It goes kind of hand in hand with another very old school game concept, which was permadeath, where you actually died in the game. Yeah. And it was so funny, when we were doing ToeJam and Earl 3, Mission to Earth, Sega's representatives, there was Visual Concepts, they were sort of acting as Sega's reps. They came to me and said, "Hey, we don't want you to do stacked levels anymore. We want a hub structure for this game and no more permadeath." And I was like, "Really? That's not ToeJam and Earl?" And they said, "Well, that's what we want. Those things are old school and they're out. Players don't want that anymore." So I did the dumb thing and I caved and I said, "Okay, we'll do what you want. It's your money." And after I did that and we released the game, I was looking at it and I realized, it completely doesn't work anymore, because the whole idea of dying and then starting over again, but you're starting over again in a random game and that you don't know, those two things go hand in hand, right? Very clearly. That was one of the biggest regrets I had about ToeJam and Earl 3 was that you play it once and you feel like you're done. The whole roguelike quality of playing it over and over again and seeing how far you can get each time. That is what that's at the heart of Rogue and a roguelike. We'd kind of done some major dirt to that concept.
Well, even with the second game, Panic on Funkatron, did Sega have much influence on the design decisions of the second game, and did that kind of change much over time?
Yeah, well, I bet you know the answer to that question already, but I'm happy to answer it for everybody. So yes, the answer is yes. We were going to do a sequel to Game 1. We had gotten about 3 or 4 months into building a sequel that was very much like Game 1, and we had done some new things, like we'd added, I remember ice and like swampy mud terrain, and we'd added caves and houses that you could go inside, and a few new elements. And Sega's marketing department came to us and said, "Hey guys, the game's not selling as well as we had hoped. We don't really know how to market this kind of game. It's sort of an outlier. What we do know how to market is games with big characters that are side-scrolling with lots of action. Would you guys be willing to switch over and make a game like that for us. And, we were young and we didn't. It's hard to say no to your publisher. You want to keep a good relationship and make them happy. And so, we asked a few questions like, are you guys really sure that's what you want? And they said yes. So we took what we had built up to that point and we put it on the shelf, and we applied ourselves to trying to figure out how on earth to keep the spirit of exploration that was ToeJam and Earl and transfer that into a side-scrolling game. So, yeah, that's what happened. They kind of made us jump tracks to that whole new approach. And in retrospect, I think to whatever extent they ever think about this, the folks at Sega would probably agree that it wasn't the smartest decision from a marketing perspective. It really confused our fan base. And I think we created a great game, and a lot of people our fan base is even kind of split. A lot of people who played the second game before they played the first game prefer that. I've found that it tends to depend mostly on which game people come to first. But, it's a weird way to do a sequel, something that's so completely different. And I think it just mainly confused people.
Well, I know before you mentioned ToeJam and Earl 3 Mission to Earth, I mean, that came out quite a long time later. That was in 2002. So what was there such a long gap between number 2 and 3?
Oh, well, I have, ever since ToeJam and Earl came out, I have periodically approached publishers every few years. You get your head down building some game, and it takes a couple years, and then once that's done, you have an opportunity to, do pitches and try to get another game off the ground. And you have kind of a narrow window of time where, because you need to survive and get something going. And so you're out there like pitching all these different ideas to publishers. At least that's how it worked in those days. It's a little different today. But so I tried pitching ToeJam and Earl many times to publishers over the years. And that just happened to be one of those windows, and we, with happenstance, pitched to a couple people who were running Visual Concepts, who was managing new titles for Sega. And and they liked the idea, or so we thought at the time. Like I said, they ended up wanting us to kind of change direction when we were about 8 or 9 months away from release, is when they came to me and said, we want some big changes to the title. But we thought we were going to be building a much more direct and true sequel to Game 1 when we started that project, and it just didn't end up being that way.
I know it did receive quite a mixed reaction when it came out. Some people really liked it, but I know some people didn't. I mean, was that a bit disappointing?
Yeah, it definitely was. There was a number of factors with that game that kept it from really achieving what I had hoped. One of them, and the main one, probably was all of the changes that we made to the game. Like I said, a hub structure and no permadeath, and they had us do a lot of things like, they said we want bosses and keys and unlockables and mini games and all of the things that the games at the time that were doing really well had, and we didn't have. But another factor was we came out on the Xbox because, the Dreamcast got killed, and we were pretty bummed about that. And we had actually built Network Play into the Dreamcast version, and then when we switched over to the Xbox, that got shelved and didn't end up making the crossover. And then I had really wanted us to come out for, I think it was the GameCube, and I can't remember if it was the PS1 or the PS2 at the time. But it was just like 2002 when we released. But the Xbox, we thought we'd release first on that because it was easier to port to the Xbox. And then, but that was a very hardcore audience at the time, a real hardcore shooter audience. And Microsoft wanted to broaden their market base and reach out to the softer gamers. And that's not a great place for a title to be. So it kind of died on the vine there before we could get onto the other platforms that would let us reach the other audiences. So I think it was partly a factor of the game itself and partly a factor of the audience that we reached. And a lot of the reviews were done by Xbox reviewers who were hardcore gamers in the extreme. And so, we just didn't really gel with them. They didn't get what we were doing. So, but actually, in retrospect too, I'm always glad looking back. Things work out for the best. I really believe that, and I think even if we had stayed on the track we were on, we looking at the game we would have made, it wouldn't have been as faithful of a retro remake, like a tribute to the original game as what we've just made is. It's we were sort of obsessed with 3D at the time. It was in the year 2000 that was a new thing, and so we kind of went too far down that path. And when I look at that game now, it's not a real true visually. It doesn't really. It doesn't take you back to that original experience in the way that Back in the Groove does.
Well, let's talk about Back in the Groove then. I mean, 17 years after Mission to Earth came out, which I can't believe it's been that long, ToeJam and Earl are back in their new game, Back in the Groove then. So why was it the right time to bring these characters back now?
You never know it's the right time until the game is actually out and you can see if it's successful or not. So I actually don't know that yet, but we're getting very close. As you probably know, we release on March 1st, and so we'll find out soon if it's the right time. As to why I decided to just take the leap now, it was a combination of factors, really. Partly, I had finished up my other games, and the last game I did was Doki Doki Universe for Sony, first-party title. And was trying to figure out what I wanted to get into next. And I got kind of bombarded by fans who, we talked about this just very briefly right before our call, right? The whole retro movement and what a resurgence there has been and is what's still going on. And so I've been looking at that, and a lot of fans have been looking at what was happening with crowdfunding and all of the retro titles that were coming back, and everybody, I can't tell you the number of emails I got and looking on forums and boards and stuff of hey, where is ToeJam and Earl? Why aren't we seeing that? And then the thing that really tipped me over the edge was an article that was by a guy named Tom McShay, and I think it was GameSpot. I apologize to whomever if I'm wrong about that. But the article was titled, Now is the Time for a New ToeJam and Earl. And it was kind of funny. It was sort of there I am looking at the sky saying, give me a sign, give me a sign. And then I look down and there's the title of this article. And so okay, I guess I'm not so thick that I'll miss that one. So that was really literally what tipped me over the edge. And I thought, okay, let's just give this a shot. And publishers and investors had told me that they thought the property was dead and too old to make a comeback. And, and like you said, Game 3 had kind of done us some dirt in terms of perception out there. And so we thought we'd run the crowdfunding just as sort of a litmus test to see. And if we couldn't get over the bar, then we would know that it wasn't really what people wanted. And we were sweating it too. It was right up until the very end. I'm sure you get a big spike at the beginning of those campaigns, and then it kind of levels out, and you have to bite your nails and sweat and figure out what else you could do that you're not doing. And then right at the very end, the last few days, it spikes again. And so, yeah, we had a 400K ask, and we came in at just over 500. So that got us off the ground.
So ToeJam and Earl are in the modern era now. How did you kind of approach this with the game? Because we've seen from the trailer, it looks quite hilarious.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you feel that way. That's a good sign if you're feeling like the trailer looks like fun. And yeah, hilarious. I think that's a really good choice of word as well. Sometimes people ask me what I care most about or hope for most with the new game. And I usually answer with, whatever pops into my head. But one of the things that pops in most often is saying laughter for people. One of the things I really value about the gaming experience that ToeJam and Earl offers and that I hope for is for people to just completely de-stress and enjoy time together, laughing and screaming and being surprised and delighted. And so there's a lot of that. That's a lot of what we focused on in this game. And you can't make a funny game unless you're having fun yourself. If you're sitting there at your desk giggling and laughing, or going to your cohorts and saying, hey guys, check this out, and feeling like, oh, we can't put that in the game, well, that's too crazy, and then people going, oh, why not, then you're kind of on the right path. I have seen people, I've been in boardrooms before with very serious people saying, okay, we need to make a game with humor. Let's break this down. What is humor? And then they'll put stuff on the whiteboard about different kinds of jokes and gags and stuff. And, and those are the games that make you kind of cringe, right?
Laughter's not scientific.
Yeah, right, exactly. You just got to have a good time and kind of cut loose. And that's kind of what happened in this game. I had a blast. I especially had a lot of fun writing all of the dialogue for the characters. We've got, you've probably seen, we've got 9 different playable characters in this game. So there's ToeJam and Earl in their new form. When our fans saw that, they were like, well, wait a second, you can't change ToeJam and Earl. You've made them grow up a little bit, but we want them to look the old way. So we give you the classic version as well. And then Letitia and Lawanda and Peebo and Geek Jam and who's ToeJam's cousin, and Flo, who's Earl's mom. And you can even play with new ToeJam and old ToeJam at the same time, or new Earl and old Earl, or any combination. And they all say different things to each other when they're together. So it's really fun and funny to have like the new TJ and the old TJ, because they're kind of confused about the fact that they look so similar, and they even kind of clue into the fact that one of them is the older version of the other one, and they have this kind of competitiveness thing going where they sort of take digs at each other and stuff. And so anyway, I had a lot of fun with the characters and the personalities, and we also had a lot of fun creating situations that would make players want to be mischievous with each other and playful, because that's where laughter really happens, is when people are playful with each other and surprise each other. So we did things like there's this awesome present called the special delivery present in there, and there's a whole class of presents that only turn on when you're playing multiplayer, and this present allows you to, when you open it, the next present you open after that, it asks you to select a present, and then you get to select the other player you want to send it to, and then they get a message wherever they are. They could be on a completely different level. It says special delivery, and then they get that whatever present you open happens to them. So you can totally help them out. You can heal them with organic food, or you can give them a protection bubble, or give them Icarus wings, or whatever wonderful thing you want to bestow upon them. But you can also be a total jerk, and you can do and expel presents on them, and all their presents go boof and fly out all around them, all over the ground. Or you can give them rocket skates when they're standing at the edge of a ledge, and they'll go flying off. Or you can even be a total evil person and give them a total bummer and cause them to explode. Or there's a burning up present, which basically turns you on fire. It's kind of awful, but it's pretty funny too. And you you can't stop running, and you're like flaming, and you have to find some water or jump off a level to put yourself out.
You just know they're going to be the most popular ones there, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. Those presents are just so fun to watch people play, and people's personalities really come out too. We have one guy in our office, one of our engineers, his name is Ko. He's got a real like devilish streak. You can almost see his like little horns and tail and stuff when he's playing. And he's always looking for ways to, he'll do an expel presence on you and then put on high tops and come racing up and steal all your presents as they're lying on the ground around you and stuff like that. All kinds of devilish combinations of things that we never even thought of, but that's one of the fun of this game, is that you can use all of your powers and presence in different, very creatively in different combinations.
And what already excites me about the game is as well that it sounds like you've now made a game that you wanted to make without all the external interference.
Yes, very much so. And I got to thank the universe for that. I also should give a shout out to Adult Swim. They were our publisher for a while. They were great. They were very hands off and they were actually fans. Our producer, CJ, he was a backer of ours, on Kickstarter before they even picked up our game. So he was very much our guardian and was like, make the game you want to make. That's what this is all about. I'm so excited. It's been a wonderful aspect of this project because it is the game I've been wanting to make for forever, ever since the original game, and have been trying to make the sequel. So this is it. This is what I've been trying to get back to. So I can't wait for people to play it. I really do think there'll be a lot of people who didn't get game one, who sat down at it, who were like Halo fans or whatever, and were just like, what is this? I'm just wandering around. And there'll be those people still, with this game. But for the people that either loved the original game or were inclined to love that sort of thing and would have, I think this is going to really hit the spot and put smiles on people's faces.
Well, ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove comes out on March the 1st on PS4, Xbox and Switch. I've seen I love the fact it's coming out on Switch because that's my main console at the moment, the Switch. So I'm really pleased to see that.
Yeah, I know. Same here. But it's a great machine.
Well, we'll put a link to the website in our show notes as well if people want to check out the trailers and everything. Greg, it's been wonderful getting your stories and the history of ToeJam and Earl. And best of luck with the new game as well. We can't wait to play it.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me ramble. I appreciate that. And enjoy, I hope I get to hear from you after you've played. I'm Greg at humannaturestudios.com. So drop me a line, and it's true for anybody that is hearing this. Just tell me what you think. I'd love to hear. That's what this is all for, so it's fun to hear people if they're enjoying the game.
Amazing. Well, Greg, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.